I had studied history, and my favorite subject in history was the muckraking era of the 20s, the progressive era. And I thought that documentaries were, for me at that time, 30 years ago plus, a way to bring, shine a light on need for reform, kind of almost on a level of agitprop, using documentaries as a vehicle. So having not studied documentary as an art and craft, I went in with this sort of reformist mentality, thinking I knew better. And I think it was, in hindsight, kind of arrogant to think that I would be able to tell others, how to do things. So that was the motivation, I think, to do something that could do change. I'm very aware politically of things. I am very interested in politics and social issues. It's just part of who I am. I think maybe it's being awake as a person and as a citizen, I guess. But as a filmmaker, I don't think the work is overtly political. It's really a storytelling of an idea that happens to also have social political complexities. And that's me. I think that's what draws me to why are you doing a film about this idea, this person, this story, rather than this one, And if it's something that I initiate as an independent film, then it's really what usually happens. It's something that speaks to me. Oftentimes, if they're self-starting, independent films, you just do it, and if you ever doubt it, it's not going to get done. And that's what kind of stunned me when I realized, oh, these films are not going to happen unless it's on your back like Sisyphus, You're just crazy enough to put that rock on your back and keep moving.
But an artist fights to retain the integrity of a work so that it remains a strong, clear vision. Art is and should be the act of an individual, willing to say something new, something not quite familiar.
How do you write about a fight between a little Jewish kid and an African-American woman of 39 about a $20 bill without it becoming immediately about politics?
Give it back! Isn't fair! You think I care? Don't shout at me! I found this money in your pocket. Your mama says I get to keep it. No, she didn't. Pocket change. She never said you could have my present. $20, give it mine. $20, give it mine. $20, $20, $20, $20.
If it's fresh, unique, real and authentic, those are kind of things that, and has wit and humor, all that kind of adds to my interest. Yeah. The process is first to get an idea or get a project, and then next, okay, that's the project. What are you going to do next? Do you know anything about it? No. So I like to know the big picture, so I'll do primary sources and secondary sources. And just try to read up and know as much as I can about that idea or subject or before I start. At the same time, I'm always thinking directorially and storytelling-wise, how is this story, what is the story about, and how am I going to show it visually? How am I going to open? And if I can figure out kind of how the opening and the closing are, I think for me, it gives me comfort that I think I'm on the right trajectory. So all that comes about by being very, the antennas are out, not making a judgment in the beginning, and let it all kind of wash over and then sit, and something will hit. And I think, that's really kind of that. So it's actually a fun time because you just, it's like a candy store. You get to kind of figure out, let it all kind of wash over you and taste this and do that, But at the same time, I find I'm being very, very quiet and sensitive to what's happening, especially if you're meeting people who might be in your film. I think for me, talking a lot actually, kills the opportunity to really understand what's going on. I usually find that there's something about that person's voice that just strikes me. It's very simple. And it's kind of frightening that I would go on this journey, 3 to 5 years later. But it's on a shred of something that I've either read or heard, that something clicks for me. And I find it's usually a person and ideas. So it's not really a portrait or a biography, but I find really it's an exploration of some themes and ideas, which are far easier to do through a person, being the front person. And that's why oftentimes it is a character who is the main character in some of these films I've done.
And all I was saying in this piece is the cost of war is these individuals, and we have to remember them first. And so it's really the people, not the politics, which is what this piece is about.
In the case of Maya, I remember first knowing about her by reading a newspaper. I think everybody read about the controversy of the building of that memorial in the early 80s. And I remember vividly, I was visiting my mom, I was in her kitchen, you know, I was just reading the newspaper in San Francisco, and I go, who's this funny person? You know, they quoted something about her. And I said, who is she? What she said was when people said, oh, you ought to change her design, they didn't like the design. There's a huge criticism of her design. And of course, they wanted to change it white, they wanted to put a flagpole in the middle of the vertex. And I remember reading her comment to these sort of criticisms was to say, well, it's like putting a mustache on Mona Lisa's face. You know, I thought, who is this? It's a very wry and funny comment, but it said a lot to me about something about her heart and her character and her head. For me, the Maya Lin film was a great way to explore a lot of different issues. If you wanted to speak about the Vietnam War, if you want to speak about women in architecture or women in general, it certainly is the issue of bringing our eyes to the place of design in public spaces. What design and a sense of place, you know, landscape architecture, a lot of different things came out. I didn't necessarily seek to bring these out initially, but as a filmmaker get into a story, I mean, lots of great things happen, and it gets better, I find, than that initial impulse to do that film or do that story. None of us start with the idea it's going to take 10 years or 5 years or 20 years. Like Maya, I thought would be over in a year and a half. But as I said, once you get into a story, then it gets really more interesting and more complex and rich, and it's okay to go instead of 1.5. I think it needed to go 5 years in terms of, because many of her projects, which I didn't know about, you know, when you read about a person, it may be just one idea, but there are a lot more things going on, and it made it for a much really fuller understanding of what it is to be an artist and an architect. I think particularly you see the last 8-10 years in terms of documentary feature films and even short films. I think the language, the storytelling, the blurring of lines between narrative and fiction and nonfiction are kind of coming together, and you find, I certainly feel, I try to do that, is to really have a story arc within the exploration of what may be an idea like war and torture or whatever it may be. If you look at Alex Gibney's Taxi to the Dark Side, and it's a story, its a subject is U.S. foreign policy, torture, and methods of dealing with terrorism. But he put it in the framework of a character-driven, story-driven approach. And I think that's what makes the documentary very compelling, and particularly to the audiences that have discovered documentaries today as a great form of entertainment, a source of great information and insight in a genre that is really a part of their movie-going experience. And I think the expectation is there is obviously themes, subjects that are of interest, social, political, cultural, but that they are framed with, a compelling story and a casting of characters who happen to be real people. I think it's easier to actually, the medium is there for you to just pick up a camera and do it and to go on your Final Cut Pro to make it all happen. The challenge, as we all know, is can you make a living? Can you find the marketplace? Can you find the audience? Particularly but I can answer my own question because we know it's going up and down even for fiction independent filmmakers. It's hard right now. At the same time you hear these great stories, people just being self-distributors. They'll get it out there into the theater. I look at the New York Times every Friday, and I'm just amazed. These independent documentaries, I never, haven't heard of them. They were able to get a publicist, to get it reviewed in the New York Times, opened at the Village or the IFC, or particularly the Village Cinema. I think it's fantastic. They will still, there are people, oh, there's a will, there's a way, I mean, it's never going to be easy, but sometimes you may hit it. For watching, I said, is it compelling? Is it beautiful? It's basically very simple, am I engaged, And with the elements that make it engaging, probably that the film is well made, whatever that is, rhythm and, and story arc, all those elements, the characters you are really interested in, you're gaining insight, you're being entertained, or certainly moved, I mean, all that. It's no different, I think, than reading a book, maybe, or if there's something. I know when I'm really not interested, it's like they're either too long, or there's something about it that could have been told. If I can read it faster than watch it for 2 hours, I think sometimes it's not making it for me. Yeah, but boy, it's exciting when you find I'm really involved, The one I love is Life and Times of Harvey Milk. I've always said that was, they should study. In fact, yeah, I think you look at great films, you can just look at them and study them, and that's something. I think Eyes on the Prize is a series. It's just profound, and you can certainly learn a lot from just not only the story, but archival and interviews, and I mean, just it's a piece of work. It's something to be valued and honored, Yeah, and that gives you 11. How's that? No, wasn't there 10 in the Eyes on the Prize? Yeah. Taxi on the Dark. More recently, Taxi on the Dark Side, and I love Michael Moore's work, especially his recent ones. I love Sicko. But I think it's all over. I'm very pleased with, I'm very, but I think the one that really has stood out for me is Life and Times of Harvey Milk, in terms of a classic. Yeah. And I think, Barbara Koppel's Harlan County. Yeah. There's some seminal pieces, yeah. I think the most important thing for anyone starting out is to say you can do it if you believe in yourself and you believe in the story and the project. It's crazy to say that, but there are so many examples of people who have done wonderful films with nothing except goodwill with their crew and with the subjects, and deferments and all that. I mean, a great example I'd like to share with everybody who may know this film is Spellbound. I mean, that was done, the filmmaker decided, Jeff Blitz decided he wanted to do this story. Actually, it's about, no, let me see. No, it's not about, yeah. Anyway, but he wanted to do this, and I know he did it with 2 cameras. They just went out and did it, and his producer never even used the camera, the digital camera. And that film went all the way. I met the editor, and she worked out of a little, deferred, and it not only was nominated for Academy Award, it then went out, was picked up theatrically. It did very, very well. I think, not that money, matters, but I think it was almost close to 10 million, 8 to 10 million theatrical gross, which translates into DVD sales, So it's even gotten better since that came out in terms of the technology. The Final Cut Pro, you could just, you've heard enough to say that it's only your imagination's the limitation, because it's all there for you to do.